It was that damn bird.
The following is a collect call from a person presumed nice until proven naughty.
Santa Claus.
Clean out your ears. Coming late 2021 to your pot stocking.
I'm out on county line. Mile marker 9. Got a signal 71. It's Slate. Red in colors appears to be unoccupied.
We're spinning a yarn about a misunderstood elf out to spread Christmas cheer and the system hell-bent on punishing him.
You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law.
Police tell us Ruthie Barker Guest was hit by the slate at upwards of 100 miles per hour, filling Scuppernong Jam across County Line Road. When they arrived at Rita Barker's home, they broke the sad news. Her grandma got run over by a reindeer.
We're talking about the most prolific serial offender in the history of the world.
We're talking about Santa Claus.
Ho, ho, ho.
Rearrange the letters in Santa and tell me what you get.
I ain't real good with words or letters.
Satan. You get Satan.
His laugh, it creeps me out.
Ho, 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 ho. I'm Dr. Peter Femsicle. I'm a forensic psychologist. I believe it could be some kind of elfin Tourette's. Ho, ho, ho.
By all accounts, Ruthie Barker Guest was a swell lady. I'm telling you, he's innocent. I'm gonna prove it. One ticket to the North Pole, please.
You are 3,995.5675309 miles from the North Pole. Starting route to the North Pole, at the stop sign, take a left on County Line Road.
I had no idea that this journey would involve planes.
May I have your attention, please, as we go through the following safety instructions. Please turn off all electronic devices. Once airborne, the captain will let you know when you can use approved electronic devices.
Trains and automobiles. Even one of those sled dog type situations. But eventually, I made it.
Welcome to the North Pole. Want to play?
I'm investigating a homicide. What can you tell me about the man we know as Santa Claus?
You better watch out. Better not cry.
I'm Richie Buck. Make room for a gift this holiday season. Santa Claus gone and got himself arrested. Since nobody else will step up to save Christmas, guess I'll have to. Santa may be a criminal. A Yuletide investigation. 12 Days of Chaos begins Black Friday. Coming soon, wherever you listen to podcasts. Like, follow, and subscribe for updates. And always remember, be nice.
Ho, ho, ho!
He sees you when you're sleeping.
Christmas magic. You still believe in that, don't you?
I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the Prosecutors. Today on The Prosecutors, when Eastern Michigan University student Laura Dickinson was found dead in her dorm room from natural causes, her friends and family were shocked. But when they found out the truth, shock turned to rage. everybody, and welcome to this episode of The Prosecutors. I'm Brett, and I'm joined, as always, with my incandescent co-host, Alice.
Thanks, Brett. Like a
You're
light bulb.
welcome. You're just like a light bulb. You're always going off.
Haven't all incandescent light bulbs been replaced with LED light bulbs? So does that mean I'm like to be replaced?
Obsolete?
Yes,
No.
obsolete.
Everybody liked incandescent light bulbs better anyways. You know, they didn't take forever to turn on. Now, they didn't last as long as these newfangled light bulbs, but I think it's more your just constant glow, the light that you shine on us all, Alice. It is just, to podcast in your light is a true blessing.
That was a very nice word. And I do actually prefer incandescent light bulbs. You don't see all the flaws on your face.
Oh, there you go. There you go. That's true. Sometimes light is not a good thing.
Too much light.
Too much light. Too clear.
I mean, come on. I don't think you're a real person if you haven't been shocked by your own appearance when you accidentally turn on the camera, like switched over, and you see your own face on your camera. It's a frightening view.
I know. It's something you can do during Halloween to scare yourself. And myself, actually, not you, of course.
There's no offense taken whatsoever, because I've scared myself a lot.
Well, good. I'm glad to hear that. Well, Alice, it's always good to be back with you. This is always the highlight of my day. I know it was a hectic Monday at work, so it's good to be able to sit down and talk about a new case with you and with everyone out there. So I guess we should dive in. First of all, I want to thank Nicole for bringing our attention to this story. This was actually not a story that I had ever heard before, and I think that is one of the reasons that we wanted to cover this case, because it seems like a story that should be better known. And I'm not going to say that it was swept under the rug, but it certainly is not as well known a story as it should be. And that's the story of the death of Laura Dickinson. And the story we're going to tell you today is one that I think is going to make you angry, and it's going to shock you. It is a true crime story, and we're going to talk about the true crime. But there are other parts of this story that are criminal, but in a different way. So Laura Dickinson was 22 years old, and she had everything in front of her. After receiving an associate's degree from Grand Rapids Community College, Dickinson decided to seek a degree in nutrition. And for that, Eastern Michigan University was perfect. The Ypsilanti, everybody from Michigan can write in if I didn't get that right, but that is a weird word. The Ypsilanti Michigan University of about 23,000 was known for its nutrition program, and it was only 2 hours from Laura's home and family. So this is exactly the kind of place she wants to go to be able to start the life that she sees ahead of herself. And she dives in to the community and the life at Eastern Michigan University. She joins the crew team. She becomes part of campus life from her dorm room in Hill Hall. And as Christmas approached, everything was going great, and no one had any reason to suspect what was coming. Alice, before we continue, I want to talk about one of our favorite sponsors, PDS Debt. Alice, as you know, you go into law school, you go into college, you're taking out these loans, and it takes years to pay them off, and people struggle to keep their heads above water, and then you have credit cards and mortgages, and life gets hard, and that's where PDS Debt comes in. And I know everybody out there is thinking this. How many of you feel like old debt or bad financial decisions, or even good financial decisions, are holding you back in life? Our sponsor, PDS Debt, has customized 0% interest options for anyone struggling with credit cards, personal or student loans, medical bills, collections, or any other type of debt.
PDS Debt is so confident they can save you money, they are giving our listeners with eligible accounts $25 Visa gift cards just for learning how to handle their debt. All you need to do is complete their quick online debt assessment and find out how much you can save. Bad and fair credit are accepted, and anyone can start saving now. Go to pdsdebt.com/TP and find out how to resolve your debt now. Now, you must have over $5,000 in eligible debt to qualify, and PDS Debt rolls all of your payments into one low 0% interest monthly payment, which helps you save thousands in interest and fees, so you can pay off your debt in a fraction of the time with one low payment each month. You can clear up your credit so you can start using it to make financial moves in the future.
So if you're making payments every month on your debt and your balances aren't going down, this program is for you. The average American with credit card or personal loan debt over $10,000 ends up paying back 2.5 times what they originally spent. So go to PDS Debt, where they are offering a $25 Visa card to listeners of our show with eligible accounts just for completing the quick and easy debt assessment. That's www.pdsdebt.com/TP. That's pdsdebt.com/TP. Take back your financial freedom today by visiting pdsdebt.com/TP.
On December 12, 2006, at 7 p.m., Laura attends a secret Santa party hosted by the crew team. At 11:12 p.m. that night, surveillance cameras show Laura entering Hill Hall carrying a stuffed toy inside a red and green holiday gift bag. At 11:30, Laura calls her boyfriend, Travis Scott, and this is the last time her phone is used. The next day, December 13th, 2006, at 4:23 a.m., Orange Amir Taylor III is captured on surveillance entering the dorm wearing a black sweatshirt and hood over his head. Then, a little more than an hour later, at 5:56 a.m., Taylor is captured leaving the dorm and is now carrying a bag under his sweatshirt. It appears to be the same bag Laura brought from the Christmas party the night before.
And obviously, this is an ominous turn of events. This is a normal night for her. She goes to have this party with her crew team. Everything seems fine. It's the kind of thing we've all done. These stories, some of the stories we cover are bizarre and they're weird, and you can't really ever imagine yourself being in that situation. Like, it's difficult. We're never going to be, Alice is never going to be, I might be. We're never going to be on the side of the Dyatlov Pass, right? That's not going to happen. And, we're never going to decide that a spaceship's coming to get us, like in Granger Taylor. That's not going to happen to most of us. But the day that Laura had is a perfectly normal day, and everything about it, there's nothing she does wrong. She's not in a strange situation. She's just gone to a party and she's come home to her dorm room, gets home, talks to her boyfriend, and probably goes to sleep. And then all of a sudden, you have this person leaving her dorm, her hall, where she lived, and appears to have a bag that came from her room. And unfortunately, that's going to turn out to be exactly what happened.
2 days later, on December 15th, the sanitation department of the university receives complaints about a foul odor coming from room 518 in Hill Hall. A worker let herself inside, and there she found something devastating: Laura's body. Laura was lying on top of a blue blanket on the floor next to her bed, wearing only a white tank top. She was naked from the waist down, and a pillow partially covered her face, and a used tampon lay near her body. Police are called, and they immediately suspect foul play and treat the scene as a murder investigation.
And I don't think it took, Scotland Yard or the NYPD to figure out that this was a murder. And Alice has just described the facts to you in the scene, and it seems pretty obvious that whatever happened to Laura, we said in the beginning that she died of natural causes. Doesn't sound like it, does it? It sounds like somebody did this to her. And yet, the next day, December 16th, Eastern Michigan University issues a press release announcing Laura's death, but noting that there is no reason to suspect foul play. And that's a quote. There is no reason to suspect foul play. Now, a later report will confirm that at the time, school administrators did not know that the police suspected murder. But the craziest thing here is no one bothered to call the police to check with them before issuing this statement, which to me, the university wants to present this as, well, we didn't know. We didn't know. How could we know? Well, you could have picked up the phone and called. I mean, you have a dead girl on your campus. She's 22 years old. It's possible she died of natural causes or misadventure. It's possible she went out, she had a lot to drink, and died of alcohol poisoning. I mean, that's a possibility, but it's not like that happens that often. I think it's probably much more likely that something untoward has befallen a 22-year-old woman who dies on your campus.
And I'm just going to point out, maybe for those of you who don't know, you typically don't take out a tampon that you are using not in the bathroom, right? And what this is suggesting is she likely did not try to change her tampon in her own room. Someone probably took that out. Why? Well, we can talk more about it, but there's kind of an obvious reason.
Yeah, and you've got this situation where the police suspect murder. I think that's one of the main reasons. And the university is trying to say, well, we didn't know. Well, we'll also learn later on that both the director and assistant director of Eastern Michigan University's Department of Public Safety were on the scene when Laura's body was discovered. But you may be thinking to yourself, okay, we're being too hard on these people. It's the next day. These things happen. Miscommunications happen. Mistakes are made. People are human. Everybody's human. So, surely the next day or the next day or the next day, the school would have issued a statement clarifying this and letting people on campus know, hey, there's danger here. But they don't do that. On December 26th, so 10 days later, December 26th, 10 days after this crime occurs, police identify a suspect, Taylor, who we've told you about, and they inform Eastern Michigan University. So they are certainly aware at this point that Laura was likely murdered, and in fact, we have a suspect. And the other thing they know is that the police suspect that Taylor may have Laura's key to the building. He may have the key to this hall where all of these people live, allowing him easy access to that dorm whenever he wants to go inside. They also know that Taylor's not some stranger. He's not some guy who just happened by and probably went on his way. He is a student at Eastern Michigan University. He is attending classes every day with other people on that campus. Despite this, the school does not issue a statement about the danger of having someone who may have committed a murder on campus. Now, look, it would be one thing you don't want to say Taylor did this.
The reason we're harping on this is because the reason you would put out a statement warning people is that this is a kind of a closed community, right? Closed community in the sense that a school usually has security around its buildings. And when there's a danger for your community, you're supposed to let people know. I know it can send panic and it's not good PR for the school. The school could kind of come under scrutiny, hot water, what have you, but it's kind of their duty to let the community know when there is a danger that could be present for the other students or the other people on campus.
And we've talked before about criminals who commit a crime and you're like, did you not know you were going to get caught? And when I was thinking about this case and thinking about what Eastern Michigan does, and we're not even done, it's like, did you actually think you could cover this up? Like, did you think you could get away with this?
And also, the added step of saying we suspect no foul play or there's no reason to suspect foul play seems misleading to me. Oftentimes, you'll see early stages, breaking news, and then it'll be updated by the minute where they just say a body has been found, period. They don't say anything. They don't say foul play, not foul play, because there's not enough information. So the fact that they took this added step of adding no reason to suspect foul play seems misleading, because even though it may start the rumor mills and even make people nervous, they didn't have to go so far as to say that. They could have just announced that there has been a death on campus and an investigation is underway.
Yeah, and I mean, it's an open question what you should do in that initial moment. We talked about this with Delphi. So immediately after Delphi, the 2 girls were killed at Delphi, the police said that there is no danger to the community, which to this day has led people to think that they know who did it, or they know the person's dead. I mean, all sorts of speculation. You know how Delphi is. All sorts of speculation about Delphi. And we talked about that. Like, why did they actually do it? The reason they did it was to avoid panic. They didn't want people to panic. They didn't want people to think there's a serial killer out here targeting children and freak out.
But you know, Brett, what's so interesting about this is I completely understand kind of the crowd control panic. But notice the date. It's December 16th. So likely, I don't have the EMU's academic calendar in front of me, but likely they're about to break for the Christmas or, the holidays right now, which is probably why Laura had been at a holiday party with her crew team. And so likely people are about to disperse and leave campus anyway. And this is kind of the best time in case there is a danger on society to get people off campus as the police do their work and try to investigate what's going on. Obviously crowd control is important, but here we may have actually an ideal situation in terms of when to investigate a case.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. There's just so many factors here that really make this inexcusable. The fact that it's likely a student who did this. So you know that this person is in the middle of your community all the time. And you know who they are, and you know they may have a key, so they may have easy access to the dorms. You already have one girl who's been murdered in her dorm room. And it just feels like you're just rolling the dice that this isn't going to happen again. You're just hoping it doesn't happen again. You're not giving people the information they need to defend themselves, to protect themselves. I have a funny story about this. A little bit of humor before we continue on in this not very humorous case at all. When I was in college, so I went to the University of Alabama, as most of you know, and Alabama, I don't know why this is, but basically 100 and Alice will think this is funny, being an Auburn fan, but there's all these insane asylums in Tuscaloosa, right?
Wait, is that true?
That's true. It's 100% true. In fact, one of the first sort of new age humanitarian insane asylums, mental health hospital, whatever you want to call it, was built in Tuscaloosa like 170 years ago. It's called Bryce Hospital. Those of you who know the history of insane asylums know there was a man named Thomas Kirkbride, I believe, who designed hospitals to stop treating them as prisons, basically. So for a very long time, for most of human society, what people have done with people who have severe mental illness is they've just locked them away, essentially in prison, in really horrible conditions. And that didn't really change, but there was an effort to change it, at least at this point, and to make them more humane, and this idea that living in beautiful settings, in beautiful buildings, could help heal the mind, right? Beautiful views can create a beautiful mind or something. I don't know. So they made these beautiful buildings, and they're these huge mansion-like buildings. And this building's been around for 100-something years. It's on the National Registry. The university now uses it as like some administrative buildings. I have a point I'm getting to. But because of that, because they built this and it was this state-of-the-art hospital in the South, all of these other sort of hospitals went there. So you had that hospital, which was the main hospital. And then there was a hospital built nearby that was specifically for children with serious mental issues. I believe it was called Partlow. There was another building called the Kirkland Center, which a lot of people who go to school in Alabama called Old Bryce, because it's really run down now and falling apart and incredibly spooky. It's the kind of place, there are probably people there right now scaring themselves. So you go there, around Halloween and get arrested for trespassing or whatnot. It was built there, and it was a workplace. So there was this idea that mental health could be cured by giving people who are mentally ill productive things to do. So basically they built this hospital, and they had a farm attached to it and a little manufacturing plant attached to it, just all sorts of things where you could do a job and maybe that would help with their mental illness. But what they also built was one of the, few in the country maximum security facilities for the criminally insane. And that is, well, anyways, they built it. So they built this hospital, this maximum security hospital for the criminally insane. And that place they never talked about. So I didn't even know it existed for most of the time I was in school. I knew about these places, these other places, which were mostly closed down, but nobody talked about that place. And then one day I'm reading the newspaper, because back then, old that I am, you still read newspapers. So we'd go to lunch and you'd actually read the newspaper. And there was a story about how a guy had escaped from the maximum security facility for the criminally insane, and they had caught him in Nevada. So he had escaped from there, and he'd made it all the way to Nevada before they caught him. The interesting thing, there were two interesting things about this guy. Number one, he was literally an axe murderer. He had murdered his family with an axe. Literally an axe murderer. That's the first thing. And the second thing is they had decided not to inform the student population to prevent panic. And I'm like, yeah, there was an axe murderer who escaped from the mental facility and you didn't tell anybody, and it just kind of worked out. But I'll never forget reading that article and being like, I cannot believe no one told us this. Taylor Hardin is the name of that facility. And I don't know, when I was reading this, I kind of thought about that. Though that I think is somewhat defensible. I'm sure they didn't think there was real danger to the university community. And I understand there is sort of this balancing act. But here, you have a very different situation. This is not some random murderer. It's not somebody who, killed his family and just happens to be in the area. This is a guy who has already targeted your students, who has already murdered one of them, and you just don't say anything.
That's terrifying. I'm so glad you're okay, first of all. But isn't that interesting when those sorts of things come out? And I haven't worked in PR or whatnot within a university setting, but I can imagine these are conversations and there are risks and benefits to what the school has to do. But at core, it just feels to mislead is fraught, right? Because what if something had happened to another student on campus? That would open up a lot of liability there.
Alice, before we continue, I want to talk about one of our favorite sponsors, Storyworth. This holiday season, I want to give a gift to my loved ones that makes them feel special and unique, just like the relationship we share. That's why I'm giving everyone I care about Storyworth. Storyworth is an online service that helps you and your loved ones preserve precious memories and stories for years to come. It is a thoughtful and meaningful gift that connects you to those who matter most. Every week, Storyworth emails your relative or friend a thought-provoking question of your choice from their vast pool of possible options. Each unique prompt asks questions you've never thought to ask, like, what's the bravest thing you've ever done in your life? Or, if you could see into the future, what would you want to find out? I gave Storyworth to my mom, and I've enjoyed so much seeing the answers to her questions about her childhood, things that I never knew.
Brett, I know. I gave it to my mom too, and I am loving the stories coming out of it. For example, I recently found out my mom had a completely different career before she had us kids. Things I never knew about my mom before are coming out through Storyworth. After 1 year, Storyworth will compile all your loved one's stories, including photos, into a beautiful keepsake book that you'll be able to share and revisit for generations to come. So with Storyworth, I am giving those I love most a thoughtful and personal gift from the heart and preserving their memories and stories for years to come. Go to storyworth.com/TP and save $10 on your first purchase. That's storyworth.com/TP to save $10 on your first purchase.
So that was December 26th, the day after Christmas. And maybe you're thinking, well, everybody's gone anyway. They're all at home for Christmas, so probably no big deal. Well, we're not done. We get all the way to January of 2007. And according to a detailed report conducted by a law firm that was hired by the University Board of Regents, one of the school's vice presidents received a report around this time from campus security laying out the details of Laura's murder exactly what they thought happened and completely blowing out of the water any notion that this was an accident or this was natural causes. Any claim you could have had at that point that the top people in the university were still ignorant of this was completely undone by this report. So, obviously when you get a report like that, what are you going to do with it? You're going to destroy it.
Wrong answer, Brett. Wrong answer. Never
wrong answer.
The right decision to put it in the shredder.
Right. Yes, no one should consider that legal advice because it definitely wasn't. But that's exactly what they did. Rather than forward the report up the chain to the campus attorneys to try and decide what in the world are we going to do, how are we going to handle this, how are we going to protect our students, this vice president shredded this report as part of what he would later term damage control.
Oh, dear.
Oh, dear is right.
That's not good. That is not good at all. And by the way, you may be asking, why is there a law firm being hired by the board? So when it's a whistleblower or some allegation of misconduct, oftentimes you will see that the board of trustees, the board overseeing some sort of university or nonprofit or other organization, will hire outside help in order to have essentially kind of an unbiased view into an investigation themselves. That may sound strange, but literally they are hiring someone else to investigate their own organization. This is actual damage control, right? Because you want to show those who give your school money, you want to show your student body, those who are paying tuition, the state of Michigan, etc. You want to show them we have nothing to hide, and also we want to get to the truth, which is why we are paying money to have an outside firm investigate us. And this is how they came about this. And it's really interesting because you have essentially a private firm acting like investigators, law enforcement. Only normal private parties don't have this power ordinarily, only when the investigatee gives them access to all of their board members and employees, etc., for interviews.
I actually did one of these once when I was in private practice. I was on the team, very low level person on this team. I did a lot of document review, and we had a case where a private company that you've all heard of, but I won't mention, was involved in we go legal nerd on this show. We're about to go real legal nerd. So there is a statute that basically says that an American company can't bribe a foreign government. So you can't go to a foreign country and, we're at a terrible disadvantage. So there'll be like a Russian company and an Indian company and a French company and a German company and the Chinese company, and they're all bribing the local officials to try and get the contract. All of them are, right? And the law is that we can't do that. So if we come in and they're like, well, the Chinese are offering us $1 million for this contract, what are you going to offer? We just have to be like, a really good deal? Anyway, so if, however, you decide to offer $2 million, what eventually will happen to you is you will be found out and indicted. And it's a big deal because it looks really bad for an American company to be bribing a foreign government. You can imagine that's just not a good thing. So what usually happens is the company essentially will throw itself, at the mercy of whatever entity is investigating it and say, let us hire someone to figure out what went wrong and to fix it. And that's what we were doing. In this instance, it's called compliance monitorship, and it's just as boring as you think. And you have to go through all their documents, figure out exactly how it happened, who was responsible, where the protections of the company failed, what they should have done, what they didn't do. I actually uncovered an affair. It was completely random. It didn't matter. But this company had an office. This is another aside. This company had an office in Geneva, I think. And one of their people, all his emails were in English. Because he was from the United States, so you would expect all his emails to be in English, including to his secretary. And then suddenly they were all in French. And so I didn't read French, right? So I put one of these emails through. It was like, this was before Google Translate. It was like Babelfish or something I was using to translate this. And the email said, like, event, party at my place, time, 8 to a question mark, dress code, optional. And I was like, oh, okay. And those are the kind of things you discover when you do document review, and they keep you sane. But in any event, Alice is 100% right. This happens a lot. It's really lucrative for law firms, and they will write these really long reports that just lay bare what you did. And really, they are not to protect you. They're not to make you look good. In fact, you kind of want them to skewer you because, like Alice said, you want it to give comfort to people that this is serious, that you figured out what went wrong, and that you're going to fix it. And that was the point of this report.
Sorry, and let's just cap this off. What's interesting, as I mentioned, is they're not actual prosecutors, right? And so note that after this investigation, even when a law firm finds wrongdoing, they actually can't bring charges. They can present their findings to law enforcement, but they don't actually have the power of the state to prosecute. So what do they do with this report? They publish it. You can make personnel decisions, right? You can fire people. You can restructure to avoid any sort of issue like this in the future. So it really is an introspective report.
And, your hope is that by being so open and introspective and concerned about how this happened and preventing it from happening in the future, that any government entity that's looking at you will be like, you know what, we're not going to punish you as harshly as we would if we thought you were trying to cover it up. You've obviously know what you did was wrong. You're accepting responsibility. You're getting rid of the people responsible. You're putting in controls to make sure it doesn't happen again. So we're going to let this go. In the world of what I was doing, what we were always looking for is something called a non-prosecution agreement. And essentially, these companies would spend all this money. They would take all this time. They would do all these things to try and show they had learned their lesson. And they could get a non-prosecution agreement from whatever government entity it was that basically would say that. You've learned your lesson, we're not going to prosecute you. And that way you avoid fines and you avoid all this other stuff, right? So that's what you're shooting for when you do those. And I think here, there's a lot on the line because if you're a public university, you don't want to have some, massive fine come down on your head. That's rough for you. It's rough for you in a lot of ways. It's going to hurt your enrollment. It's going to make your alumni very angry. It's going to make the people who give you money very angry. So they had a lot on the line when they were looking into this, and they hired one of the best law firms in the country to look into it, and there's no telling how much this cost them in total. So that's early January when they know this. Fast forward all the way to February 23rd. February 23rd. Remember, this all started on December 15th. That's when Laura's body was found. We are now in February 23rd, more than 2 months later. At this point, Taylor is arrested and charged with murder. And it is not until then that Eastern Michigan University finally announces publicly for the very first time that Laura was murdered. Laura's parents would learn about the circumstances of her death from the news. For the first time,
devastating.
Students, I know, it's terrible. And this was handled very poorly by a lot of different people that happened. Because even if, putting aside everything else, they should have been told at least that day before the news came out. But, they weren't even given that consideration. And for the first time, students learned that a rapist and murderer had been on campus for 2 months. And you can imagine that everyone is incredibly angry.
So that is the timeline. Now, there are many unusual aspects to this case, even more than what you have heard. Let's talk about the statements by EMU. This case is more than just a murder case. It's a case about the insane cover-up by EMU. Stunningly, Eastern Michigan appears to believe that it could have just kept the murder of Laura under wraps forever. Maybe they thought if no one was ever arrested, they'd never have to admit the truth about what had happened on campus. Although EMU administrators would later state they did not know this was a homicide or that they were confused by statements of law enforcement, a later report by the Department of Education found these claims to be contradicted by the evidence. The report concluded, quote, Not only did EMU fail to disclose information that would enable the campus community to make informed decisions and take necessary precautions to protect themselves, but it issued misleading statements from the outset, providing false reassurance that foul play was not suspected and that it had no knowledge of an ongoing criminal homicide investigation prior to the arrest of the suspect.
Yeah, I mean, which is just completely false. And you notice now the Department of Education's involved, which is a little bit worse than having your law firm look at it. You know, these are the people who regulate you. If you're a public university, you're receiving public funds, and you're receiving federal public funds, and you have a lot of obligations. We're going to talk about some of your legal obligations here in a second, but you have a lot of obligations, a lot of things you have to do, and it's one thing to act out of ignorance or not realize that you're not complying with the various obligations you're under. It is another thing entirely to know that something has happened and try and cover it up. And when you do that, they say it 1,000 times, and it's always true that the cover-up is worse than the crime. The cover-up is always going to get you, and you see that here. At some point, people on campus realized they had made a mistake. They realized that first statement, just assume for a second that first statement is actually what they believed. That's fine. Assume that's true. At some point, they realized they got it wrong. And rather than correct it and take the hit, they engaged in this quote-unquote damage control where it seems like they just hoped it would go away, that nobody would ever know and they could move on with their lives. But obviously, that's not what happened. So we have a murder here. And, this is not just about the failure of Eastern Michigan University. It's also about justice for Laura. So let's talk about the actual crime. So the autopsy concluded that Laura was likely killed by asphyxiation. Probably not a surprise to any of you. Unfortunately, because of the time between Laura's death and the finding of her body, the cause of death could not be definitively stated, nor could doctors find definitive proof of sexual assault. And, this is one of those things we talk about a lot, how important it is to act quickly. And it's just unfortunate. I think the time of year really had an effect here. I think because it was so late in the semester, people just didn't think as much of the fact that they had not seen Laura. She could have been anywhere. She could have been done with her finals. She could have gone on home early. Her parents had called her and not been able to get in touch with her, and they had actually they had decided to go check on her, and by the time they went to check on her, Eastern Michigan University had found her body. But because of that delay, even though it wasn't a significant delay, it's only a couple days, the process of decomposition had started. Asphyxiation is difficult to prove in the best of cases. You really do need to find the body early. And sexual assault can be the same way. It can be very difficult to prove sexual assault if you don't have instantaneous access. And they didn't have that here. And those facts would become important at trial. And one of the things that would become central at trial was Laura's heart condition. So Laura had a congenital heart problem called non-sustained atrial tachycardia. Taylor, in his defense, would claim that perhaps this is what had killed her, that in fact, she had not been attacked. She had not been raped. She had died of a freak cardiovascular event. So basically, she died of a heart attack. Now, unfortunately for him, an expert would testify that the condition was benign and that it would not harm the victim. To make matters worse for Taylor, he stated that he had never seen or heard or read anywhere in the literature about this condition of a woman who was the victim's age who died from a myocardial infarction, and that it would be extremely, extremely rare for a healthy young woman to die of any cardiac condition, particularly in these circumstances. Remember, Laura's an athlete. She's not somebody who's just sitting around on the couch like I tend to do, eating Cheez-Its. This is somebody who's on the crew team. And if you've ever attempted to row crew, that is really, really hard. I mean, it is hard for me to state how difficult that is. I tried to do that for like one day and I was done. Um,
And you can see a picture of her. She looks like the picture of health as well, right? She is not, she looks healthy. Her cheeks are rosy. She's, of good body weight and muscle mass. Everything about her really screams healthy.
Yeah, there's nothing about. I mean, obviously you can't always tell just by looking at somebody, but she looks like an athlete. I mean, she looks like somebody who's in good shape. She looks like somebody who rows crew.
I will note this though. My son was born with a hole in his heart, and that is not that uncommon. A lot of these pediatric cardiac conditions resolve themselves, and it happened in my son's case, which is great. But the things the doctor told us to look out for because of his heart condition were blue lips, cold limbs, gasping for breath when they were just sitting still, right? Not during strenuous activity. All things that you all probably know. You don't need a doctor to tell you that those are things that you would look out for if you had a heart condition. And I don't believe that there was any trial testimony that Laura exhibited those symptoms ever, and certainly not in the weeks or days leading up to her death. There was a trial. Taylor was tried for Laura's murder. In addition to the video of Taylor entering the dorm, police collected semen from Laura's thigh that matched Taylor's DNA. They were also able to obtain fiber evidence. Fibers found on the victim's body and tank top matched the black acrylic fibers from Taylor's sweatshirt. They found the same black fibers on the pillow that had partially covered her face, and they also tape lifted Taylor's sweatshirt and found fibers that matched those from the blue blanket that Laura was found laying on top of.
And can I just say, this is exactly how fiber evidence should be used. There are those of you out there who've heard all the problems with fiber evidence, and I just feel like in some of these cases you hear about forensic evidence and it gets really just, well, you can't trust fibers and you can't trust this and you can't trust that. And it's probably true that you should not hang an entire case on a fiber. I mean, that's a bad idea. But when you have a circumstance like this where you have other evidence that puts the defendant there, some strong evidence that puts him there, probably enough evidence on its own. And then on top of that, you can add in these fiber matches that just sort of go to confirm things. I think this is really good use of fiber evidence.
Prosecutors played the tape interview with Taylor in which he admitted to breaking into dorm rooms on more than one occasion and stealing items he found inside. Taylor admitted to breaking into a room in Hill Hall the night of the murder and stealing a bag. He said, however, that he didn't see or touch anyone inside that dorm room. He certainly denied assaulting or killing anyone. I don't know how he's able to do that with this fiber evidence. What the fiber evidence tells us is that the black sweatshirt that he was wearing at some point touched the blue blanket that Laura was laying on. And also, remember, there was semen found on her thigh. Astonishingly, the first trial ended in a hung jury. This meant that there was not a unanimous vote from the jury to convict. And when there's a hung jury, there is no conviction. Now, 2 of the jurors bought the defense theory that Laura may have died of an underlying heart condition, despite the overwhelming evidence that Laura was raped and murdered by asphyxiation. In his closing argument, the defense attorney suggested that it was possible that Taylor had found Laura's dead, partially nude body and masturbated over it. The attorney said, quote, "It may be somewhat freaky, but does that make it murder? No."
Which is such an absurd argument. We talk
goodness.
about the difference between reasonable doubt and doubt sometimes. And this is the kind of thing where you're just like, well, who knows? Maybe this happened. And unfortunately, 2 jurors are like, well, maybe it did. Who knows? Who can say? Do we have a video? We don't have a video. So how can we convict him? I mean, that's essentially what these people did.
This is what we argue all the time to jurors, right? Just because there is a crazy world where you can explain the evidence to the defendant's favor does not mean reasonable doubt. He had to say that about the masturbation because there was semen found on her. So he had to explain that. So do you have any holes do you have to, hoops do you have to jump through? How many hoops do you have to jump through? We talk a lot about Occam's razor, and you do not check all reasonableness and all rational thinking at the door when you become a juror. Not at all. You bring your experience and your life experience to bear.
Yeah, and this is, people talk about, so, I don't like talking about people who criticize us, but sometimes people, they listen to our episodes, they don't like how we come out, and they're like, well, they just speculate. That's all they do is speculate. And it's not speculation. You're using your informed judgment based on your experience, like Alice said. And Alice has already laid out some things for you. We know how she was found. I mean, does it fit your experience that this 22-year-old woman went into her dorm room, took off her pants, left her shirt on, took off her pants, took out her tampon, threw it to the side, then had a heart attack, fell onto the bed, and the pillow just happened to fall over her face? I mean, does that fit your experience? And then this guy walks in and is like, oh, dead person. Well, this is a great opportunity. I mean, no, that does not fit your experience at all.
And also, it doesn't, just because the defense attorney doesn't bring it up doesn't mean you don't have to think about it. Let's say he did walk in and find a dead girl. Why would he not report that? Because guess what? If his DNA is going to be found around a dead body, he's going to be a suspect. So if I were not guilty, I'd be like, oh my goodness, I need to alert somebody because my DNA is going to be in this room already and we need to figure this out so that I'm not charged for something way worse than masturbating. Murder.
I mean, yeah, if somehow you were just so overcome by this that you just had to do that while this girl is laying dead there, yeah, you would think at some point you'd be like, I just implicated myself in a murder in a really serious way. Maybe I should do something about this. Yeah, I mean, it's just crazy. It's so stupid. It's such a stupid suggestion that he has made and that he maintains to this day that that's essentially what happened, that I can't believe anybody bought it.
Brett, before we move on, can it be? It's finally fall and we're going to really enjoy the season this year. So naturally, I've started thinking about looking good and getting cozy, comfy, and, well, we're going places. And, we're already going to the office, grabbing drinks with friends like you after work, and chilling by the campfire and apple picking. I'm even looking forward to a getaway with my husband and packing a real vacation bag. And that's where Faraday comes in. They make the perfect clothes for getting comfy.
Yeah, Alice, when you want the best quality clothes, you call in the troops. When you're searching for that ideal flannel shirt, the one that feels like you've had it for years, soft, warm, with a perfect plaid that fits so well and feels almost too good to be vintage, but it looks like it still could be. That's the kind of clothes you can expect from Faraday. I know I personally love my plaid shirt. I wore it recently when it was nice and cool outside, and it was amazing.
Well, that's Faraday, and they're so confident in the quality of their stuff, they have a lifetime guarantee. And to top it all off, Faraday is giving all of you 20% off. So stock up on all your fall and winter clothes now. Head to FaradayBrand.com and enter the promo code TP at checkout to snag 20% off all your gear. That's Faraday, FAHERTY, brand.com and promo code TP for 20% off your Faraday purchase. If there was a hung jury, the prosecution can try you again. Now, it's exhausting, and sometimes the prosecution decides not to go for it. But I think the evidence is so strong here, the prosecution brings a second trial. And the second jury was less impressed with the defense's theory, and it took them only 4 hours of deliberation to find Taylor guilty of first-degree felony murder, assault with intent to commit sexual penetration, first-degree home invasion, and larceny in a building. He was sentenced to life imprisonment. Now, Taylor appealed, claiming ineffective assistance of counsel and insufficient evidence to convict. Real quick, even before you get to the opinion, there is definitely sufficient evidence to convict in this case. But much like the second jury, the court was unimpressed, rejecting Taylor's appeal in an opinion running all of just 3.5 pages. In other words,
which is crazy.
That's really short.
I mean, if any of you have ever read an appeal in a murder case, it takes 3.5 pages just to set up the facts. much less to go into the law. And he's got two different claims he's making, but they were just, and we'll put it on the website so you guys can read it. But there was just no question in the court's mind that it was a frivolous appeal. This guy is clearly guilty, and they rejected him.
Now, Taylor remains adamant that he is innocent, but I think the evidence before you clearly shows that he's lying. And in fact, he is a murderer.
Yeah, I don't think anybody has to worry about a wrongful conviction in this case. Well, it wasn't just Taylor that had consequences because of his actions in this case. There is something called the Clery Act. We talked about this earlier. There are all sorts of laws that apply to you if you're a public institution. And the Clery Act requires colleges that receive federal funds to collect and release information about campus crime and to issue warnings about threats to campus safety. Much like the trial, it didn't take the Department of Education much to realize that Eastern Michigan University did not live up to its obligations under the Clery Act. EMU would eventually pay a fine of $350,000, which is the largest fine ever levied against the university for violating the act. In addition, Eastern Michigan would settle with Laura's family for $2.5 million, and they were probably fortunate that the family was willing to settle with them for that amount. The president of the university was fired for his role in the cover-up, as was the VP of Student Affairs and the Director of Public Safety. So a lot of people lost their jobs, and a lot of money changed hands as a consequence of this. And I think, at least in Michigan, EMU has worked very hard to restore their reputation. If you go to their website, they have an entire section based on this and the things they did in the wake of this to try and do better. But obviously, this is the kind of black eye that is difficult to ever recover from. And I think it goes without saying that college can be wonderful, but college campuses are also pretty dangerous. Those of you who enjoy documentaries, there's a documentary on Netflix called The Hunting Ground, which is pretty good about universities and about sexual assault on university campuses. It's a tough documentary, but it's an enlightening one and an eye-opening one, and I would suggest you check that out. As for Laura and her family has attempted to keep her memory alive so that people remember Laura, not for what happened to her, but for the human being that she was.
What a sad case. I mean, because it's already devastating enough for any family to have to bear the death of their healthy, vibrant, promising daughter, sister, friend, but to kind of have this all further complicated and demeaned with the university's cover-up is a really sad coda to this already very sad case.
Well, they were really victimized twice. I mean, I think you can say that. They were victimized once when their daughter was murdered, and the university victimized them in the cover-up. And, I'm glad. I think what I'm glad is that the university's incompetence in covering this up did not prevent justice from happening in the end for Laura. And I'm also glad that nobody else was attacked in the interim. I mean, that's but for the grace of God on that one. So hopefully this is one of those cases that's a lesson for every college administrator. I've got to think when college administrators meet at their boondoggles to talk about campus security, this is a case they talk about and how to avoid this and how to make sure this never happens on their campus. So hopefully that's the one good thing that came out of this case. Well, like I said, this was a really interesting one, and I want to thank Nicole again for bringing this one to our attention. As soon as we read it, we wanted to do it. And I hope all of you will reach out when you have cases that are interesting from your area, or cases you're aware of, or cases you just feel like need more coverage. We are always looking for cases to do and cases to cover. And I don't know how much this has been covered in true crime, but the more we can sort of get eyes on these cases that aren't heard as much, I think we should do. If you guys have any thoughts, questions, comments, or any suggestions of cases you want us to cover, reach out to us at prosecutorspod@gmail.com, at prosecutorspod on Twitter and Facebook, Instagram. We're on Reddit. We're on YouTube. Join us at Patreon if you want to not listen to our ads. So we have a few things we want to talk about with you guys. Number one, a scheduling issue. We are going to take the last 2 weeks of this year off. And by that, I mean we're not going to release episodes those 2 weeks, but we're not going to take them off. We're actually going to try and record as many episodes as we can. Alice and I have a very, very busy first of the year coming up. I have a trial in January, and then Alice and I both have a trial in February, and that trial may last a month. It could last longer. So we're going to try and make sure that we have enough episodes recorded beforehand that we can continue to release episodes, even if we're too busy to actually record them. We probably will not be as active on social media and various other places during that period. We haven't disappeared. We haven't gone away. We haven't started to hate you and not respond to you. We're just having to deal with the fact that it's called the prosecutors for a reason. So, sometimes life intervenes. Also, you guys know we've been with Audio Boom this year. We are actually moving over to Podcast One and joining their network. We're so excited to be a part of Podcast One. We can't wait to join them. I don't know that anything will really change for you guys. The experience should stay the same. The show's going to stay the same. But we're hoping that this will give us the opportunity to have more people hear the show and grow our audience and grow this family even bigger. So, like I said, not going to change for you, but we are very excited to become a part of the Podcast One network.
And we have loved our time with Audio Boom. They really ushered us into this latest chapter of this podcast. So all great. We've been really lucky to only affiliate with the best in this business.
It's true. We started off with Buzzsprout, which was fantastic. It was a great place to start our podcast. I recommend it to anybody when they're starting a podcast. Then we moved on to Audio Boom, and they've helped us really grow. But we feel like this step is a step we can take that could really give us an opportunity to really expand the audience and reach even more people. Well, Alice, do you have anything else you want to add before we sign off for tonight?
No, thank you guys for being just the best listeners ever. Keep sending these interesting, important cases that need coverage.
Yeah, and I hope that shows. We read your emails. We love you guys. We love talking to you guys. We love interacting with all of you. And if there are cases you want to hear covered, let us know. Well, that's all we have for today, but we will be back next week with a new case, new questions, and hopefully new answers. But until then, I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the Prosecutors. Hey, there's danger here. But they don't do that. And it's not until December 26th when police identify a suspect, we've already told you about, Taylor, and inform Eastern Michigan University that... Oh, they don't even do it then. Okay, let me back up. But they don't do that. Who died from a myocardial infarction. Okay, here we go. Sorry for all the chit-chat.
I love the chit-chat. Other people don't, but I love it.
I actually think people do like it.
I know. I think it's just the news thing.
Okay.